Hey, listeners. Austin and I went through 55 minutes of amazing discussion on bounces, spam traps, inboxing, and it wasn't until the very end that he shared his offer. So we've recorded a little thing here to let you know what the offer is, just in case you don't get through the 55 minutes of discussion on bounces. Austin, what's your offer?
Hey guys, hope you guys enjoy the podcast. We had a great conversation about email. And to celebrate what we were talking about, ZeroBounce is going to offer 5,000 free email validations to try out the platform. You can contact me directly at Austin, AUSTIN, at zerobounce.net, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can look for Austin Helm, HELM, and then find the one that works for ZeroBounce. Shoot me a message. Let me know you listen to the podcast, and we'll hook you up with some free credits. So hope you enjoy.
Okay, entrepreneurs, executives, and spammers, enjoy the pod.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
If you're not preparing prior to actually executing your email marketing strategy, you're behind the 8 ball. The main thing you want to see in terms of inboxing is before you use any of these new domains that you want to send from, it's very important to warm it up.
What would you recommend for weekly number of addresses that you add during rewarm as we go towards 500,000? My 2024, all I was hearing from all my audits is like, we're in spam, everything's horrible, our click-through rate's 0.25%. It's harder to get inboxed. Now, I wonder if you can just confirm the severity of the situation from your perspective. It's the world's best email and retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilot House email and customer retention team. Today, I am joined by Austin Helm of ZeroBounce. Austin, it's great to have you here. I love really nerding out deep on email. And so bringing someone in who, works kind of on a tool that is really in the kind of plumbing of email is exciting for me. Hopefully exciting for our audience too. So for starters, I'd love it if you just kind of tell us about briefly your life path that brought you to ZeroBounce, and then what you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Jordan. I'm excited to be here. And I also love to talk about this topic as well because it's what I do and deal with on a daily basis. So I find it very interesting. And it seems so simple from the outside, to the regular person or somebody that's just getting into email marketing. But there's so many things, so many gears turning behind the scenes to make it work, to make it seem so simple on the outside. That makes it a very interesting topic. But in terms of what got me to this point, so I actually came out of school and was interested in tech. I went to University of Richmond and then did some studying out at Stanford University, which is where, and it was really during the app boom, right after the iPhone, and when all these startup companies, everybody was trying to start something, figure out the next big app, and get involved in the development of these types of things. And so I just got engulfed in that world and was fascinated by what was going on. Came home, actually tried to start a company myself, but I lived in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is the place where tech dreams go to die. Unfortunately, it's not a very big town. Nobody had anything like that going on back there, so it was tough. And then life took me down to Florida, and I was looking for a job. And I went on AngelList. I don't know if you were ever on AngelList at any it changed its name, I believe, to something different now. But anyways, it was a place where you could find jobs in startup tech companies. And so I saw a job posted for ZeroBounce, and it was a company. So I was living down towards Miami at the time, and this job was up towards Boca, which is about 30 minutes north. And so I was like, oh, this could be a good fit. It's in sales. I'm kind of naturally good at that type of thing. So let's check it out, see what's going on. And so I call up the guy who posted the job, went up and interviewed, and on the way back, he calls me and offers me the job. And I remember getting there, and it's a small shop. They're talking about email. We do email validations. We make sure emails are actually real. And I was not really aware of email, like other than using it for outreach and things like that, and then just the basic email stuff that you do on a daily basis. I didn't know a whole lot about it and didn't know the potential of it or what it would ultimately turn into today, and in terms of its importance. And so when I was learning these things, we're going through like the market and projections and things like that. And I'm like, these numbers are insane, but this just seems crazy. Like the things you're telling me are crazy. I don't know if this is real or if this is true. But I need a job, so I'm gonna learn about this and figure it out. And wouldn't you know it, the guy who was telling me about this stuff was dead on with what was coming and what it was going to turn into. And so now I've been with ZeroBounce for about, I think, going on 7 years now, have been in email now for 7 years, have learned a ton. The company has grown. I was probably, between the 10th and 20th employee, somewhere in there in the company. And now we're up to about 100 people. So it's grown like crazy because the industry's grown like crazy. People's awareness of the problems that we solve have grown like crazy, which is another interesting thing to talk about. And so, yeah, now we're here.
Yeah, well, look, let's jump right into that. Talk about the problems that you solve. By the way, everybody, full disclosure, we are a ZeroBounce client. It's a service that we need to help our clients succeed. So yeah, Austin, tell us what ZeroBounce does more specifically.
So one thing I love about what we do is it's so simple. Like my job so I'm now the sales manager. My job is it's so easy to sell and explain to people. We do email validation. We make sure the email contacts that you have are real. And that clicks with people right away because they're like, "Oh, I have a zillion bad emails." Sometimes email, especially if I'm doing outreach, I don't get to the person I want to get to. I constantly myself am filling out forms, giving them garbage information. I know sometimes I love to give my brother's email just so they annoy him and not me when we're doing things. And so there's all kinds of stuff that goes on with these types with this type of data. And so we just make sure that that data that you have is real, because an email address, when you really think about it and break it down, your contact list, your email contact list is your business. This is how you communicate and do things. This is your network. And it's the basic form of communication. It's the digital form of the mailbox outside your house. So it's of vital importance that you have that correct information. Otherwise, you're just simply not going to be able to communicate.
Yeah, and so when you do the validation, I'm already getting some questions. Are you doing like a DNS call to kind of is there like some kind of registry that you actually check to make sure that that thing is real, so someone doesn't have to send?
Yeah, so the base of the validation that we perform is an SMTP handshake connection with the host server of the email address. So the equivalent I like to use, it's like me going to somebody's house, knocking on the door to see if anybody's home, and then reporting the result back to you, to put it quite simply. And so the SMTP component, it's just a server ping. We're just pinging the server. We do some things like that's the base of it. It doesn't work for every type of email out there, and especially some of the older providers like AOL, Yahoo, Hotmail. You have to do a little bit more work and get your hands a little dirtier to figure out what's really going on with those types of email addresses. So one of the things that we do with those is we'll actually, if given permission by our clients, if they have a lot of those emails, we'll send an email to those addresses that goes directly. We purposely try to get directly into their spam folder. And so, they can't tell, they'll never ever see the email. They can't tell it's sent from us, but we'll know that, okay, this email landed somewhere. This is a valid email address. And then we can give you that result based on that.
Yeah, interesting. And when you say the server, sorry, audience, I'm getting so technical. When you say the server, you mean the kind of the server that has the name record?
Yes.
That's the one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. but that's what you're doing for like Gmail. But like you say, Yahoo, AOL, you're doing your
Yeah.
hands a little more dirty.
Gmails, corporate addresses, if whatever we're trying to validate, we can validate anything that's out there, anything across the globe.
Yeah, very good. So, look, I've got a whole list of really nerdy questions. Before I destroy my audience with those nerdy questions, I'd love to hear at like a higher level, what you see as some email and especially some inboxing trends in 2025, and take a chance to maybe talk about some strategies that you're going to use within that framework to kind of help people make their 2025 happen.
Yeah, so kind of alluding to what I was talking about earlier with people now becoming much more aware of the problem. And one of the biggest periods of growth we saw during the company was actually during COVID, when everybody started, everybody's locked in their house, everybody started turning to email to communicate. So naturally, everybody started coming to us because email is one of the cheapest forms of marketing and communication there is. So they started learning more about email, learning more about how important it is to have good data and things like that. So we actually saw a shift in our sales patterns that was reflective of the education that people were getting in the space. And so where it's at now is you see a clear trend before the summer and before the holidays start, where people are validating their list, they're cleaning up all their data and having everything buttoned up so that when those time periods come, when the big sales periods come for them, they're 100% ready to go. So where before what we started to see was you would see the validations in a lot of our specific sales happening during those periods of time. But now because they're being educated, they're preparing beforehand. So that simple thing, if you're not preparing prior to actually executing your email marketing plan and your email marketing strategy, you're behind the 8 ball. So number one, the main thing you want to see in terms of inboxing is planning. Plan your strategy out so that you are ready to go when it's time to execute. Make sure that you have valid contacts and you know what you're going to send, you know what you're going to say, so that you can get in front of the people that you want to get to. The other big thing I'm seeing in terms of inboxing and what a lot of people are asking about is two things. No, the other is domain strategies. That's becoming a very popular thing, especially now that people are doing all different types of outreach via email, and people are now, because they know what's going on, they're very protective of their domains, especially their main domain, if they have one that's representing their brand. So like, let's say, for example, let's take our website or domain, for example, ZeroBounce.net. If ZeroBounce.net is the main domain, it's the one everybody knows, it's the site everybody goes to, and I'm communicating with Austin at ZeroBounce.net. If I'm doing cold outreach with that email, and that cold outreach is going out and it's bouncing, it's not reaching the people that I need to be reaching. Meanwhile, I'm talking to the clients and the people that I already have with that domain. The effects of the email sending with the cold outreach, that poor reputation that I'm starting to build because I'm bouncing emails, is going to affect my ability to communicate with the people that I already know I can communicate with and really need to protect. And so what a lot of people are doing now, especially like if you go on GoDaddy, Network Solutions, those types of things, they're getting the whole domain package, the .net, the .org, the .com. Some will like change different words like ZeroBounceValidation.com, something like that. Something that's different from the main domain that you want to protect, to do that type of outreach and have that type of correspondence. And so that way, what you're doing is not going to affect the domain and the main one that you want to protect, but you're still having the effect of the hunting effect with the new domain that you have. So coming up with those different domain strategies, people are getting a lot better with that. And if you're having issues with your old domain and you really want to protect it, I recommend looking into something like that, spreading out your outreach with different domains so that you can keep everything safe and segment that way.
That's super cool. I mean, it sounds like people are really getting into it, right?
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of pass through? Like if you've got a similar domain, like just, your .com and a .net, and you damage your sending reputation on one domain, does Gmail pass any of that to the similar domain?
We haven't seen anything like that. And, it's a good question because maybe something changes eventually where Google now and those companies, they kind of realize that that's becoming someone's strategy and they're able to tie the domains together. But as of now, that's the best way to go.
And you'd also obviously have to have a different sending IP.
Yes.
So you have two completely different email stacks, right?
Yes.
And would you have to use two different? I guess you would have to use two different senders unless you've got some really crazy sender that allows you to have multiple kind of accounts, basically, right?
Yes. So a lot of people do use different senders, but I've seen people, and then some people that own their own infrastructure, they just use different servers, or different IPs for each of them. I mean, you want to talk about IPs? We're the king of IPs. We have we go through so many IPs, it's insane. But yes, that's another component of it. As you're building and configuring your email stack, is what's going on with the IP that you're using too. Because if the IP is bad, that can also affect what's going on. But yes, so I would say now, and this is right now, you could get away with using different domains, same IP. But I don't know if that's going to be done, like how long that's going to last,
Gmail's
because I'm
gonna
sure.
know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to know. I learned the hard way because when I started working in email, there wasn't really an industry. There were just people who were saying, hey, let's market with this thing, right? And so along the way, so many years ago, I definitely nuked a couple sending domains, right? And on one occasion, this is just to share a story, on one occasion, we definitely ridden that domain dirty. And the interesting thing was the company had basically a tool for clients, and clients were able to send as well to their kinds of clients. It was like a weird little agency situation. Anyway, some people had started using that tool for spam. So we had people who were spamming through our domain, and I was, also riding it pretty heavy. And a Black Friday came along, and we had a sales team, and so I sent, I think, 500,000 addresses, and I dynamically changed the send from email address to the associated salesperson. So the email went out with 30 or 40 different send froms, and it was 500,000 emails. And that was definitely the straw that broke the camel's back. It just went to toast. You go into Postmaster Tools, and the line just went to the very bottom, and there was nothing we could do. We tried to rewarm it. I think someone probably manually at Gmail was like, "This is garbage," and nuked us. And I wonder, from your experience, so you feel I've never been able to talk to anybody. But I just know it's oh, don't do that again. But dynamically changing that send from and having 500,000 email just go out with 30 or 40 different send froms, that's not going to be taken very well by Gmail.
Oh no,
correct?
but that wouldn't be taken well. If you're just getting started with a new email, if there was no change, if you're using the initial one that you're trying to send from, that wouldn't be taking well. Another thing that, and this kind of gets into trends that people are doing, another thing that you'd want to do in that scenario, and this is important to touch on, before you use any of these new domains that you want to send from, it's very important to warm it up and make sure that these providers get familiar with what you're trying to do. And then I absolutely don't recommend jumping into 500,000 emails right away. You want to start with, I always say, you have to build slow. You start 5,000, get good deliverability. 10,000, show good deliverability. 25, then 50, and then 100, and then you have to build up to that number. If you just come in fresh, no warm up, no nothing, and just blast out 500,000 emails and think that you're gonna have good results, you're in for a rude awakening. That's what would be a good analogy for that? That'd be like walking into a football game, no pads, and you're going to get the ball first play and think you're going to run 90 yards for a touchdown. It's and not get injured. That's what that equivalent is like.
What would you recommend for daily number of addresses or weekly number of addresses that you add during rewarm as we go towards 500,000? Have you got that number in mind?
So It's relative. I would say figure out what your goal is first, your target number. So if like 500 million is your target number, let's say, and I have a new address, I've done the warm up for a month. That's kind of what you want to. That's usually the time period to get a warm up done. You've done the warm up for a month. Everything's configured. Everything's good to go. Me personally, I would start small. I'd go for 5,000 first and see what I got. And then after I get good levels of deliverability, and what does good levels of deliverability means? That means your deliverability percentage is, at least in my opinion, 97%. 3% is usually the magic number we see for where, in terms of bounce rate, in terms of the where you're going to start seeing problems going forward. So
let's really quickly clarify with the audience so they understand. The deliverability rate that you see in your sender is basically 100% minus the bounce rate. So it's the inverse of your bounce rate. An important point for everybody: just because there's a good deliverability rate doesn't mean you're getting 97% inboxing. It means that you're getting 97% non-bounces.
yes,
Sorry, Austin, please continue.
exactly. Thank you for the clarification there. So that bounce rate, 3% is the magic number that we usually tell people and we recommend. And so when you get around that number, you're going to start seeing problems. So if you're starting at 5,000 and you're in good standing there, you're 97% and above, increase. And I would be comfortable then going to 10,000 and then checking it again. Do it a couple times. Okay, we're above 97. And then from 10, I might get a little aggressive. I'd go to 25. And then,
and is this assuming that this was a list that you hadn't really worked with before? Is that what we're talking about? Or this is like, or you're rewarming a list that you already had and you're kind of moving it to a new.
Good question. So yes, the data comes into question prior to what you're doing, because the first send you do is going to tell you a lot about what you have. And if you have, or if you have a lot of organic data, like you've been getting things through forums, it's been through conferences or something, you're getting things through. You absolutely want, and we're doing this all assuming you verified the data. You don't want to do these sends, especially if you're getting into something like 500 million, without verifying the data first. If you purchased a list and you want to go send to it, you don't clean the data first. You go and do that first send, you're going to realize real quick, okay, a lot of this is absolute garbage. But through the verification process, you should be able to get yourself the majority of the deliverable emails that are going to be within that list. Now, purchasing data, most of it's garbage, as we know. Like I always say, if you got a purchase list and it's 60% valid, you hit the absolute jackpot. The number that you should expect is anywhere between like 20 and 40%, and that's just what we see. But again, this is cold out. If you're doing cold outreach with this purchase list, it's different than whether it's organic data. Somebody's coming in, it's like a warmer type lead, and or a warmer contact, somebody that you've nurtured. Your results and your engagement is going to be a lot better. But if you're doing the cold outreach, you really got to take it slow. You really got to take it slow and build up to the point that you want to get to with those contacts. But if it's people that are warmer, then you can be a little bit more aggressive as you're making your jumps and your tiers with the volumes that you're sending. So it really depends on the type of data you're dealing with. You really want to do a good job of segmenting so that you keep the good contact, the good ones, the ones you know are good, separate from the ones that are more iffy, so that what happens with these guys doesn't affect what's happening with these guys. So you just got to be really strategic about what you're doing, and just use basic logic and common sense, and don't just patience is another big thing that you need in this game. Patience.
And always unsubscribe your hard bounces when you move them from one system to another.
Get them out of there. Just get them out of there. The email's not coming back. It's not coming back. Nothing's happening. They're not coming to buy. It's just get it out of there. And I'm sure, that's another thing we'll get into is spam traps. But and what can happen with some of those old emails, how it can be even worse if you keep it. So
yeah, and so to step into that stuff. So let me start by just setting the stage a bit for what I kind of think is going on, and I'd love to hear from you on this, because what we do at Pilot House, it's all empirical. We run stuff, we see what happens, and just naturally evolve our strategy around that, right? So my 2024, I don't know if this was your experience too. My 2024, all I was hearing from all my audits, looking at potential clients, is like, we're in spam, everything's horrible, our click-through rate's 0.25%. And I'm sure that's not everybody out there. I mean, obviously that's someone that needs the service, but there was like a big downshift from 23 to 24 that I assume was from Gmail and Yahoo's changes. And now it's just like, just generally, it's harder to get inboxed. Now, I wonder if you can just confirm that if that's true and kind of the severity of the situation from your perspective.
Yeah, it definitely is harder to get inbox, and it, especially referring to which inbox, like especially in Google, like you go into the promotions folder, you go into the other folders that they've created that segment things, and obviously the goal is to get into the main inbox, and that's such a huge question from people. And I would say the severity of the issue in terms of like your ability to get into contact with somebody that's new or fresh, it's gotten much harder for sure. For sure. You have a lot more hurdles you got to climb or get over, and a lot more dragons you got to slay to get to the inbox than prior.
In my discussions with professionals before, they've talked about, and I've just parroted it because it made perfect sense. There's this like statistical threshold you have to get over to get in the inbox. And there's a whole lot of things involved in there, like engagement and the structure of the email, the copy. Does it say free, free, free? All these kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
So you feel that in general, that threshold is higher.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt, it's gotten much more strict. You got to remember the basic goal of email, and it's just to get the real emails to the real people and do that in a manner that's not annoying. And so they want to get rid of everything annoying. And so anything that's annoying, they are trying their best, because those are their clients then too. They don't want to annoy their clients. And so they try their best possible way they can to just get rid of all the spam, all the annoying stuff, filter it the way it needs to go. And so if you don't hit the metrics and the marks that they're looking for, then it's going to be much tougher to get into the inbox. And so my strat, like what I've said, and especially, we're getting inundated with all this AI stuff and automation and this and that, and it's like you got to keep up with this and do that.
More garbage. There's going to be so much
stuff,
garbage.
More stuff to get to just confuse yourself. And you really just have to keep it simple and be a human being. Like, think like a person. If I'm emailing my mom, I can tell you right now that email is getting delivered. It's going to her. It's getting to her because I'm speaking like me. I'm speaking like a human being. I don't have a million things going on, and it's just regular human communication.
Also send size too, right? Like
yes,
the smaller the send size,
the way it looks, plain text, not a bunch of fancy things going on. And so if you like can just think, if I'm trying to communicate in that manner and I'm sending things in that manner, how can I match what my strategy is to something that simple that's going to get the message across that I'm trying to convey, and at the same time not piss off any of the powers that be that are going to impede on my ability to get my email where it needs to go. So it's really become an art. There's people who are good at it and people who just don't know like how to maneuver within the lines that are there.
Yeah, and so currently, after I would say a bit of a sea change, like what we tell people is build the email program you would want to be on.
Exactly.
Period. Don't have an email program that you wouldn't want to be on.
Send emails that you would want to get.
Totally.
Yeah.
So look, this is our 2025 kind of our game plan. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. By the way, audience, I haven't prepped him on this at all. So if he says my ideas are horrible, we probably won't air the episode.
Jordan's got good ideas.
But so also, I've been told specifically by professionals, Gmail's number one indicator for inboxing is engagement. So of course, the text is important, the structure of the HTML is important, but the number one thing is, are people engaging with the email? I do want to track someone down who really, 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 really deeply understands Apple Privacy Opens. Austin, by the way, are you like this Apple Privacy Open expert, or must I continue my search?
You probably need to continue your search. I don't know much about the privacy opens. We have had like some people complaining about Apple. It hasn't been a big thing that we've seen. Like with us, it's been a lot of Outlook and yeah, stuff with Yahoo's. Yahoo's is always a problem. So I would we haven't hit anything much on the Apple spectrum.
That's, okay. So we're tightening our window, right? Because engagement's the number one, right? And what we're always fighting with is like, God, does Gmail consider an Apple privacy open an engagement or not? And every time we try to test this, we get different readings in different directions. And the only way I think of it is they think it's kind of an engagement. But you know what I mean? So anyway, tighten our window, specific strategy for Apple privacy opens, understanding that it's a weaker open, which in reality, it's a weaker open anyway, right? And through that tightening, you obviously get a better benchmark engagement rate. Also, I'd love to know what you think. You've just told us. What do you think? An email marketing program, let's say one that's between 50 and 500,000 addresses in the program. What do you think the CTR, the unique click-through rate, the bounce rate, and the spam complaint rate? If you work on spams, what do you think those rates should be?
I would say click-through rate. I don't know if I could give you a good number there because I've seen so many different things and it's different for many different people, or depending on the type of the stuff you're selling, and it varies from industry to industry. I don't know what a good general number is. It might be more industry specific in that regard. I mean, I can tell you this: the spam rate you want to be 0. Like you don't want anything spam related. You don't want to be sending to spam traps. You don't want to be doing any of that. What were the other ones you mentioned?
Oh, I just said click-through rate, bounce rate, and spam complaint rate.
Yeah, bounce rate is a pretty general 3%. That's like you don't want it to be 3%. If you can get into the 99th percentile, and that can be done at scale. It can be done. I was at a conference recently where I was at I was speaking at a roundtable with a couple different CMOs from big corporations, big ones. And these people are sending millions and millions of emails a week with 99% deliverability. That's how involved you have to be, like at that level, and how protected the email component of what they do is, that they are doing this at that scale with that level of deliverability. That's insane segmentation, insane strategy from a domain perspective. Everything, the IPs they're sending from, everything is totally buttoned up so that they can get the most engagement possible through those emails.
Sometimes, so first of all, we always run our bounce rates below 1%. We're quite, significantly below 1% because we're very strict with our segmentation. So it's like you don't get too many strikes. I've noticed sometimes that if we're running like a domain really heavy, we'll just have this kind of like a little burst of bounces, like Apple. Something that's like, a little burst of bounces from Apple, right? And I've always kind of just said like, oh yeah, the inbox provider is just getting some indigestion. You're just stuffing too much in there. But I wonder do you know what's actually happening when that happens? Because it's not, the address was fine.
Is it like a soft bounce?
A soft bounce, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Soft bounce. Yeah.
That could be a number of different things. With soft bounces, those can be things like the mailbox is full of the person you're trying to get in touch with. With those soft bounces, it's really you just got to kind of cool it down, or like things like out of office replies. That's another type of soft bounce, and so you really got to again, it depends on your strategy and what you're doing, because if you get those, you may or may not want to reach back out, and depending on the type of soft bounce that you're getting will determine the time frame that you need to wait before you go and then try to reach back out again. So it can be an issue. It doesn't have to be that big of an issue, but you really have to just look at what's going on. So it could be a number of different things with those soft bounces. You really should look at it and see what's actually going on, so you know whether or not, like it was the holiday. This guy was out of the office. Let's just put this to the side. We'll mark it to him later on.
Yeah, we give
Or
90 days. We get a soft bounce for like just, you're in the corner for 90 days because that's enough time to come back from your vacation,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. That's the safe thing to do. Now, mailbox full is a little bit different. You that one is you might not want to send to that again. I don't know if I'll send to that again because this just a mailbox that's just been entirely neglected and this person is never going to answer and you just keep bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. That you don't want to do. So it really
You
depends.
always got to think like how many people on your list have passed away.
Yeah.
Lots of them, right? It's
Hmm.
life is life. So walk away from an address if it's a bad address for sure. But Austin, I'd like to jump into some of these because we're actually already at 35 minutes. It's been such an amazing chat. I love talking about the guts of email. But some things I wanted to make sure we got through for the audience. So first of all, really quick, can you just explain what's the difference between a soft bounce and a hard bounce for the audience so they understand, because those things are in their sender all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So a hard bounce, we'll start with hard bounce. Hard bounces are bad. They do much more damage than a soft bounce will. And if you have a lot of them, can really damage what's known as your sender's reputation or your sender's score. And so, and for those listening, the sender's reputation or your sender score is what's used by email service providers to track your performance and your domain. It's just how you're known between the providers so that they know whether or not they're going to help you to deliver the emails or they're just going to dump you entirely into spam. And so if they see you constantly bouncing emails, hard bounces specifically, flags go up, this guy's spamming, he's just sending to any old email and we're shutting him down. And there's the steps of the shutdown and the flags you start seeing and the warning signs you start seeing that lets you know you're headed for complete and total disaster. But the genesis of it is hard bounces. So if you start seeing hard bounces now, hopefully you've validated your data so that you don't get hard bounces. But if you start seeing some hard bounces in your sending, you want to get those the heck out of there and do not send to them again. Kind of what we touched on a bit earlier with versus a soft bounce. That's where an email. So a hard bounce is the inbox does not exist. It's not a real email address. Get it out of there. With a soft bounce, the email box can exist, and so but it's something is going on with that inbox specifically that negates the delivery of that specific email you're trying to get. Things like an out of office reply where someone's out of the office and they're not going to be back over the holiday. So email address exists but can't get into that inbox, soft bounce. Or mailbox full, another example where the mailbox is full and so there's no more room for your mail to physically go, and so it gets sent back to you, and that counts as a soft bounce. So address exists but can't fit any more mail, sorry, soft bounce. And so then you have to decide what you want to again, like Jordan was saying, you have to decide what you want to do with those emails and whether you want to give it that cool down period of 90 days or so, or whatever the case may be, whatever your strategy is based on the type of soft bounce code you're getting. So that's the main difference. Is the hard bounce are just straight up the addresses don't exist. This isn't a real email. Versus the soft bounce where, okay, there's an inbox there, but something's going on with the inbox that's not allowing your mail to get delivered.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. So soft bounces, I'm much more interested in hard bounces lately, just because my understanding is, and I'd love for you to confirm this, is that every spam trap, maybe every spam trap, most spam traps start with a hard bounce. Is that correct? Someone told me that.
I would say generally yes. That's probably the case because not all of them, because so there's two types of spam traps. There's the pristine spam trap and there's the recycled spam trap. The pristine spam trap is the worst kind. They're ones that have been specifically created out of thin air, basically, as a spam trap, ready to just be injected into lists, purchase lists, data scraping from websites, to prevent all of that going on. They're just kind of secretly injected in there just because if you send to one of those, basically the providers know that, okay, this guy's doing things to get whatever data.
But they didn't create the email address. They took a dead email address, right? They took an
That's
inactive
the
email address.
recycled kind. That's the recycled kind where they are taking an old email address and then now turning it into a spam trap. And in that case, yes, that will mostly start with a hard bounce. So
And
go
so
ahead.
interestingly, though, that means they're actually creating like
Oh
John
yeah.
Doe, whatever, John Doe 325, and subscribing to people's programs to see if they're being nasty. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. And they're
And is it
go ahead.
AI doing it? Is someone sitting there doing it?
It's a good question as to whether AI is doing it or someone is actually doing it. I imagine, AI is probably going to start doing it if it's not already, but before it was people just creating them and using them to try to just get the bad data. I mean, that's how serious these companies take spam. They don't want these types of things occurring. So I'm sorry for anybody who's listening who purchases lists out there, but they don't like that. They don't like you purchasing data and then using that data to go in and send. So a lot of times these things will be injected into those lists and into those places that the data providers are getting it from, because the data providers will scrape websites and do things just to get any data they can find, use that data, fill the quotas that then they're then selling to you, which then has the spam trap, and then you actually get in trouble because they went and got data from a place they shouldn't have went and got it from. So that's what you have to be careful from, and that's why you have to validate your data, because you don't know where it's coming from or what they're doing to get the data. So this is intended to penalize the people that are doing those types of practices instead of the organic method of obtaining data, which is through forms, websites, marketing, those types of outbound efforts.
So let's imagine you're one of those brands. Let's imagine you're a client of Pilot House Email and Customer Retention, and we're as white hat as it gets, right? We don't do anything nasty. Sometimes on Black Friday, we send a few too many emails. That's it, right? Right. That's like the nicest nasty there is. Again, on this playbook, this ties back into our playbook. So we tighten up significantly on the campaigns in reaction. I mean, Gmail and Yahoo, they're telling us like enough of the crap, and then using automations to do a really, really long reach back. Now, the thing about this really, really long reach back is, and again, everything we do is empirical. So we've been our team's been together for 3 years, and we've just been testing a whole bunch of things and kind of just building off of the results that we see. Meanwhile, I always have questions in the back of my head, right? What is the volume of spam traps that, realistically exist? I mean, from 6 months to a year, from a year to 2 years, from 2 years to 3 years, from 3 years to 4 years. Is there this thing where the longer you go back, the more spam traps there are? Do you have any idea what's actually happening under the hood there? Because I can't really get good reporting on it.
So are you talking about in the entire data spectrum or within an individual list for like your company? Like, let's say like within your specific contact list.
Let's say I got a client with, 200,000 addresses, right? And so like, again, we're as white hat as it gets. So we're like playing around, segments don't usually go more than 120 days. And they're super clean segments that don't usually go more than 120 days. That's where we play. And there's no spam traps in there. But like, let's say, we do some large reach backs during things like Black Friday, Labor Day, right? So if we reach back 2 years, I mean, we do a bunch of segmented. We got tactics to do where we know effectively we're not causing any damage, but we're super super tight as we do this really long reach back, right? I don't know how, and could we be looser? Maybe we could. I don't know, but I always have this concern, like, what if year two to year 3? So it's been that long. Like, the longer it's been since someone's engaged with an email address, what's the increased chance that an inbox provider is going to take that address and turn it into one of those recovered spam traps, like you said? Do you know, is it like tons of spam traps when you go back a few years, or is it kind of just the same amount, as you reach back years?
So I would say the further you go back, the more spam traps you're going to find, like within your specific list. If you've been just keeping that data and you haven't done anything with it, and it's just been churning and churning, it's you're gonna find more and more and more. Like the older the emails get, the more likely they are to turn into a spam trap, especially if they hard bounce. The other thing that affects this is the type of email it is. If it's a B2C email, not as likely to turn into a spam trap as a B2B email would be, because there's so much more churn in B2B emails than there is in B2C emails. And so for that, like to clarify that a little bit, B2B email, corporate domains, organizational domains, things like that. B2C email, personal domain, Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail.
Yeah.
So
Your email address is your own chosen social identifier. It's your social unique ID. Doesn't change very often, right?
exactly. I've had, I mean, I don't know how long you've had your personal email for. I've had mine for my entire life, basically since high school. So it's been the same thing, hasn't changed. But your professional email might change. For some people, it changes yearly. So the average lifespan of an email's generally is anywhere between 3 and 6 months. That's how short it is. 3 months for the business end, 6 months for the personal end. So that's you have to keep up with the data maintenance.
How does that 6 months, when you say the life of the email ends at 6 months, what do you specifically mean?
It can mean a bunch of different things. It means the status of that email is different from what it was before. Whether it's turned into a spam trap or it's just an invalid email, the person hasn't stopped using that email. Person changed jobs, that email is now done, and it's just a part of the catch-all setup within an organization. So there's a bunch of different things that can happen to an email, but that's generally what we see is that the lifespan is anywhere between 3 and 6 months.
Does that mean that there are actually spam traps hiding between 6 and 12 months? Because I generally don't. I generally start worrying after a year.
So for yes, and I would say that's where your concern should be. Like with spam traps specifically, that doesn't necessarily mean the quality of the data is good, inside 6 months. But for spam traps specifically, it'll be some time before it actually turns into a spam trap or something someone's going to use, because they do give it a grace period and give people time to clean up their data, so that basically what they're saying is, look, if it's been a year and you haven't done anything to this data and you email this guy, we know you're just not even trying. So that's pretty much how they look at it.
Is there any place, like I know that there are some, we offer, I'll tell you what we offer. We offer, we are the best customer retention team in the Roman character set. Absolutely. And we offer a phenomenal service, but it is like, I like to say, it's burger and fries. It's gourmet burger and fries, but like, we don't have crazy bells and whistles. So I'm not paying for a service to measure spam traps, for clients. I would just bloat my, my retainers, and our practices. I know our practices are safe, right? That said, is there any way that I can get, spam trap counts for a domain I'm sending to? Sending from. I apologize for domain I'm sending from.
Well, I mean,
What I'm talking about is like, so you know what? It was on a Black Friday at one point, and I was, it was an excellent and it was an excellent Black Friday for the client, right? Like they were up,
yeah,
right? But I was doing some like egregious sending, right? They made it through. There was, some, like I say, some indigestion in January. Everything was fine. But over the course of this, it was really interesting. Over the course of this, they got an email from, it's some kind of ambulance chaser within the spam industry, where they got this, the client got this email saying, hey, look at all these like spam traps you're hitting. And there was like a screenshot. And of course they're trying to sell their service, buy our spam trap monitoring service or whatever, right? An ambulance chaser. And by the way, that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, I'm probably like,
doing
sending enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, I actually just loosened up a little bit. It was great Black Friday for them. But look, they have that information. Somehow they know that that company knows where the spam traps are.
Yeah. Well, so I can tell you, us specifically, like if you validate your data, we'll be able to, with us, we'll be able to tell you which emails that you have are actually spam traps. And
Well, we do validate our data with you. I just didn't know this. Austin.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We have a specific category status code for spam traps. But the reason we're able to do this, so there's entire companies out there focused on this specific problem. Spam trap networks, one of the big ones being Spam House, like for example. And so we have partnerships with a lot of these organizations that give us real-time feeds of the spam traps out there. So we have a database, and and unfortunately it's not for sale. It's proprietary, and it's probably one of the best ones out there now at this point. But it's constantly rotating and updating with the most recent information on spam traps that we can get, and these specific ones that we can find. And so then when people send us their lists, if we cross-reference it with one of the spam traps that we have within our database, then we're able to say, hey, spam, you got a spam trap here. Get this out of there. Don't send to this. And then you effectively have solved the issue that you're talking about. Now, if you're looking to get into that, like build a database like that, then you'd probably have to start building relationships with some of those companies out there that are focused on this, like the Spam Houses of the world, that do this type of thing for a living.
The interesting thing though is if we, bottom line, if we bring in a big client, they got a big list, we will use ZeroBounce to just go in and clean up kind of the dark corners where we might want to do some messaging, here and there. And so the thing is, so you have that code and so we can use that to know, okay, well, here's from what we've cleaned up. Here's the spam traps from what we've cleaned up. But actually, the point being, it's not like I send an email, oh, this is how many spam traps I hit. That's not the service that you do. Although, I suppose if someone's cleaned it up, it doesn't really matter as much.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now, look, final question on this. Do you have any idea what your kind of coverage rate is on that? You can't get all the spam traps. There must be other ones in there.
You can't get all of them, but like I said, I think at this point we probably have the best database out there. Like we've really focused on this problem, and I might have to come back to you with our specific numbers, because I do know that we do have the numbers, and I just don't know them off the top of my head. But we can get most of the stuff that's out there. Like it's rare that we miss one.
You can always come back on the pod, by the way.
Yeah, I would love to. Would love to. I've enjoyed it.
So listen, you know what? We're like close to an hour. So maybe consider
an hour already.
Yeah, 54 minutes.
Flew by. Wow.
Yeah, totally. Because we're chatting email. Look, like email. This is the thing. And I'll just tell you my thoughts here. It's like it's ubiquitous. No one thinks about sidewalks, but then when you're walking through the mud, you're like, oh man, I could use a sidewalk. Email is
100%.
Like
Good way to think about it. Yeah.
Every single e-commerce conversion resolves to email. Email is like the kind of the central channel in your kind of e-commerce ecosystem. Doesn't mean it's the one that drives the most revenue, but it's the center. And when it falls apart, everything's just really hard. It's hard to hit your targets. Your shopping carts are always abandoning. It's just kind of really, it's really hard to make it work. You can't scale without email, essentially. So super important channel. Was great to have you on to give our audience like a look kind of under the hood at what's happening there, and help them understand how to have a better email channel, because when your email's working well, your whole e-commerce system's just got this lift. And when it's not working well, you're just getting, your whole domain revenue just gets dragged down. So look, any closing comments you have for the audience?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on, Jordan. Really appreciate it. Would love to do it again at some point. And then we do have a special offer for your listeners. So if anybody wants to try out ZeroBounce, and you reach out to me directly, austin@zerobounce.net, or just find me on LinkedIn, Austin Helm, working for ZeroBounce, obviously. Shoot me a message, and you can try out the platform for free. We'll give you 5,000 credits. You can validate 5,000 emails, see how it works. You'll see all those status codes, and you'll see the spam traps that we were talking about with Jordan, and how we can get those out of there, amongst other deliverability services. But again, Jordan, thank you so much for having me on, and look forward to working with you in the future.
In the inbox late night, Glowing screens, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Hey entrepreneurs and spammers, remember, you can't scale without email, and the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.